Yeah, so anyway, what I thought we'd do is I have a little PowerPoint presentation. You don't have a handout. No, you don't. This was a last-minute decision I threw in. But this is just to give you a flavor of how each social system is to be affected by the new group of world servers. And so just kind of sit back and let's take a look at this. And the first few slides are just laying out some principles. So we'll begin by this. Every social system has a role to play in the manifestation of the hierarchical plan. Okay? 2, each represents categories of human consciousness evolving toward a higher order. I mentioned that before. 3, service to the plan requires that we learn to recognize the deeper patterns and spiritual principles seeking to express societal, express through societal institutions. And so that's that idea of, can we recognize the soul nature of a institution? I mean, it's really hard sometimes when you see politics, for instance, and you see what goes on in the political world. It's hard to see the soul, but it's actually there. And can we see it? Can we see it? Another point. Okay, we're going to move on now. So here's the first social institution, government. As an agent of the plan, the function of government is to act as a wise outlet for the urge to lead. This manifests as a government guided by loving purpose, dedicated to the welfare of its citizens, and knows itself as an essential part of the global community of nations. Herein is essentially the political mandate of government. The plan supports those political principles and patterns of thought that are guided by synthetic vision, both within itself and as it pertains to the larger whole of humanity. So synthetic vision meaning seeing the big picture and seeing how everything is synthesized and connected as one. So in a way, government, when it looks at its country, it has to see all of the parts of it as one living expression, but it also has to learn how to see the bigger picture where the country itself is one living expression among the community of nations. And of course, the emergence of the United Nations is a helpful tool and will become increasingly so. Let's look at the next one. Education. Education is governed by the urge to learn and understand. When guided by the intuitive promptings of the plan, civilization will increasingly move toward a model of education centered around a student's inborn wisdom. Therefore, the innate gifts of each student must be determined, for they are the gateways that lead to his or her higher consciousness. Though development of the concrete mind through traditional educational means remains essential, it is the cultivation of a student's abstract mind that the plan seeks to facilitate within the Department of Education. So there's something about discovery of unique gifts. And of course, the work of Rudolf Steiner, you know, do you have much of that here in Ireland, the Steiner schools? That's interesting. You know, I know quite a few of my students in different places are deeply involved with it. And there are, you know, in New Zealand and Australia and in the United States, you find them. They're not, it's still small, but the principles behind it are very similar to this. You know, what is the child's innate wisdom? And so, of course, Steiner and anthroposophy is a branch of the esoteric philosophy, you know. It's one of the, it all stems out of, Steiner broke out of the theosophical trend and created a movement, and so did Alice Bailey. But they're both theosophical. So let's go to the next one. Economics and business. At this time in human history, the plan is prompting disciples, largely from the Third Ray Ashram, to modify the monetary systems that underpin human consumption. Its intention is to guide us toward a deeper and wiser understanding of resources and how to use them correctly on behalf of humanity's betterment. The patterns of truth conveyed by the masters via the plan help us recognize the interdependent nature of various economies, local, national, and international. It also conditions our minds with a growing sense of economic responsibility for all human life, not just the select few. So this ashram, this is the third ray ashram. This ashram is really very much guided by the idea that creating right distribution of resources to ensure the sustenance of all life, that's the key. And no other institution is more savvy, more capable of understanding movement of resource than the business world. Of course, the business world has to rise above its personality nature to do that. But nonetheless, and some businesses are, some of the most progressive businesses you can imagine are out there, and also businesses that have a social responsibility consciousness as well. In the United States there's something, and here in England, and I know also in Australia and New Zealand, they have something called socially responsible business. And to be a member of that as a business, you have to demonstrate that the bottom line is not your only important focus. You have to prove that you are attentive to environmental concerns and protection, that you're doing things in the community that enrich the community beyond just your product. There's a whole set of criterion for it, but that's a positive movement. Okay, so that's that one. Let's look at the next one. Culture and the arts. So this would be more along the fourth ray line. Within the Department of Culture and the Arts, the plan supports human evolution via two areas of influence. Within the area of artistic endeavor, it assists human consciousness to recognize that beauty bears witness to the divine. When guided by this principle, artistic expression provides us with a means to touch the garment of God and be lifted by its splendor. Secondly, the plan seeks to slowly condition human consciousness with the mediation skills needed to bridge the knowledge of the past with the progressive ideas now cresting on the shores of human consciousness. See, that's the thing about the fourth ray that's often forgotten. It's very much the bridge between the past and the future. We think about it as the artistic ray, but it's also the ray that is trying to mediate the past with the future. The United Nations is an entity that is growing out of this rhythm. The mandate of the United Nations is to be a mediator of international conflict and supporting peace through an understanding of cultural appreciation. And so the United Nations is just in its beginnings forms, it's in its adolescence, so it has a lot of growth to go. But the day will come when this institution will play a huge role, much bigger than it is now. And I personally think that this is going to become much more powerful, the United Nations, when that ashram begins to externalize. Because this is the ashram that is not in incarnation right now, except for an occasional scout. It's like a 1 out of a million chance that a person would be a fourth ray soul. That ashram, we are told, as I said last night, will begin its incarnation somewhere around the year 2025. And so we would expect that group of souls to start entering into adulthood in the middle of the century. And I think that at that time we'll start to see a real enrichment of the United Nations in a much deeper, more profound way as more fourth ray souls navigate their lives toward it and make their contribution. And by the way, just so you know, the Tibetan has said that the fourth ray ashram will galvanize the artistic world in a way that will reconfigure it back to what its mandate is, to bear witness to the divine and to help humanity recognize that beauty and truth are synonymous terms, that there's truth in beauty, and that beauty is a gate to divinity. That's the purpose of art, is to lift the spirit. But art is, there's fabulous art out there, but there's a lot of art that is not so fabulous offered by people that think they're Rembrandts, there's a great deterioration in the world of art as well. And this will bring it back to life. And according to the Tibetan, all forms of artistic expression will benefit when this group of new servers, this is part of the new group of world servers, when they come forward, all the arts will be enlivened, but the two that will be the most, or the initial areas that will be enlivened, is the so-called art of living and the art of language. Those will be the two areas that will be galvanized first. Okay. Science. So spiritually considered, science exists for the purpose of shaping into human consciousness an understanding of form and its role as an agent to life. As more of the plan is recognized or registered within the minds of those who work within the Department of Science, we will see a growing emphasis on the science of consciousness. In turn, this will one day lead to the scientific discovery that consciousness underlies all that exists. And we were talking a little bit about that last night, I think. That when, in fact, we also had you and I had a conversation last night about that too, where there's more and more science being applied to this mystery called consciousness. And the day will come when science proves the existence of the soul. And that will be a very pivotal time in human history when that happens. And it's reasonable to think that it could happen this century. Everything will change when that happens. And it not only will change our attitude about life, but it'll change our attitude about death in a whole different way. The Tibetan says something like, by the end of this century, death as we currently perceive it will be gone, because we'll have a more rightful understanding of what death is. Right now we have a distorted understanding of it. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. Religion. The cause of religion is found in humanity's yearning to understand the intelligent being that gave rise to the universe and to develop a reciprocal relationship with it. By way of the plan, the higher pattern seeking expression through religion is one based upon principles that negate theological exclusivity. The plan also conveys intuitively realized ideals that will help move humanity's religious urge toward the foundational tenets of the New World religion predicted to emerge sometime in this century. So there's a couple important points here. The first is the idea of that the negation of theological exclusivity, meaning the idea that a religion has the truth and the others do not. And a lot of religions hold that view, particularly Christianity, to be honest with you. It's one of the most exclusive of all the religions. Probably the least exclusive of all the religions is Buddhism. You talk to a Buddhist, and you talk to the Buddhist about Jesus, and they will say, another Buddha. But you talk to a Christian about Buddha, and they will say, they won't say, another Christ. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's the exclusivity. And you see, that's separateness. That's separateness. And the Tibetan says that the great illusion of humanity is the so-called heresy of separateness. The heresy of separateness. Separative consciousness is what is causing most of the world's woes. Yeah. It has been said that evil is rooted in the perception of separateness. Evil is rooted in the perception of separateness. Okay. And I think that's the last one I have. Yes. It's interesting because you might notice that I just went through 6, not 7 slides. So you may say, well, what about the 7th ray ashram? I'm so glad you asked. The seventh ray ashram is very unique because the seventh ray ashram, that's called the ray of ceremonial order and magic, that's the group that wants to ground things. The seventh ray wave of disciples is all about bringing heaven to earth. It's all about grounding things, rebuilding the world based upon a sense that we can repattern the way things are done so that they're more true to type as the Creator intended, and that it'll bring more of the best of us into outer life expression. So it is the ray of practical mysticism. And we are going into the age of seventh ray age. You know, we talk a lot about the Pisces to Aquarius, but you got to realize there's also another transition, sixth ray age to seventh ray age. And so it's all about moving into a much more seventh ray process, grounding things, making it real, rebuilding patterns in the outer world. So why doesn't it manage, or why isn't it connected to an institution? Does anybody know?
They're not here yet?
They're here, and they're coming in big numbers.
Coming in.
Well, they're here, and there's many that are adults too. In a way they are. In a way they're beyond institutions. These are the manifestors. They're called the manifestors. These are the people that make things happen. See, what's so interesting about the seventh ray ashram is that they are found supporting all the other ashrams. There are seventh ray people that are working with the first ray politicians, seventh ray people working with the educators, with the business people, with the artists, with the scientists, because seventh ray makes things happen. These are the administrators. These are the people that organize and make things happen. They understand how to use time rightly. They understand sequence. They understand right proportion. They have a natural tendency to understand how to assemble and make something happen. So either people with seventh ray souls or seventh ray personalities are usually very well organized people and are able to get things done, manifest. You know, a sort of a sideline story just to highlight that for you. Many years ago, I used to teach a course with my teacher in Denmark. In fact, I was just talking to somebody about that. And it was really a very intense study of this philosophy. And in that 5-year course, we had about, I don't know, maybe 25 students from different countries in Europe. And part of the course was to eventually kind of come up with your own ray assessment. But this was a full credit, this was a degreed course, and it was a PhD, actually. And the idea was for people to complete the work, they had to have 80% of the homework done in the 5 years, 80% of the study and written work done, plus submit a project. Now, of the 25 students, only 6 or 7 actually finished all the work and got the degree, okay? And of those 6 or 7 people, all but one of them had a seventh ray personality. And there was no one in that group that had a seventh ray personality that didn't get the work done. There's something about that type of style where they just, it's like work before play, I'm going to get it done. It's going to get it done. And this is the ray that's coming in. This is the ray that's going to shape our future. So the more you can think in terms of seventh ray patterns in your own work, the better. Even though you may not have seventh ray in your system, you may not be a seventh ray disciple as a personality or as a soul. Get into it because you're going to get a lot more support energetically. Yeah.
What examples maybe of seventh ray institutions is there?
Well, okay, her question is there any example of a seventh ray institution? Not really, although the one that people talk about isn't really an institution, but it sort of gets in that direction. It would be the world of architecture. Because architecture is rooted in design and grounding and building. And so in that sense, if we thought of architecture as an institution, that would be the closest thing. Well, that I can think of anyway. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions on that?